Right. Okay, so Parshas Noach. Iris, over to you.
Okay. God instructs Noah, the only righteous man in a world consumed by violence and corruption, to build a large wooden teva, ark, coated within and without with pitch. A great deluge, says God, will wipe out all life from the face of the earth. But the ark will float upon the water, sheltering Noah and his family, and 2 members, male and female, of each animal species. Rain falls for 40 days and nights, and the waters churn for 150 days more before calming and beginning to recede. The ark settles on Mount Ararat, and from its window Noah dispatches a raven and then a series of doves to see if the waters were abated from the face of the earth. When the ground dries completely, exactly 1 solar year, 365 days, after the onset of the flood, God commands Noah to exit the teva and repopulate the earth. Noah builds an altar and offers sacrifices to God. God swears never again to destroy all of mankind because of their deeds, and sets the rainbow as a testimony of his new covenant with man. God also commands Noah regarding the sacredness of life. Murder is deemed a capital offense, and while man is permitted to eat the meat of animals, he is forbidden to eat flesh or blood taken from a living animal.
Thank you. 1 sec. More. Yeah.
Noah plants a vineyard and becomes drunk on its produce. 2 of Noah's sons, Shem and Japheth, are blessed for covering up their father's nakedness, while his 3rd son, Ham, is punished for taking advantage of his debasement. The descendants of Noah remain a single people, with a single language and culture for 10 generations. Then they defy their creator by building a great tower to symbolize their own invincibility. God confuses their language so that one does not comprehend the tongue of the other, causing them to abandon their project and disperse across the face of the earth, splitting into 70 nations. The Parsha of Noah concludes with a chronology of the 10 generations from Noah to Abraham, later Abraham, and the latter's journey from his birthplace of Hasdim to Haran on the way to the land of Canaan.
Right. Thank you. So,
Rabbi,
yeah.
So was Abraham the same generation as the builders of the Tower of Babel? Because it says the descendants of Noah remain a single people with a single language and culture for 10 generations. And then it says the Parsha of Noah concludes with a chronology of the 10 generations from Noah to Abraham. So was he of the same generation as Babel?
That's a very good question.
I never thought of that before, but
No.
Seeing it on the same page.
It's a good question. And then Avram is introduced right at the end. So it makes sense he would be only a generation or 2 after that. Well, no, because it says that people started to worship idols as well. We mentioned that already. That's Enosh, isn't it? Is the first one we're told worships idols. I'm trying to think. I need to get a chumash and get a timeline. I never noticed that before. I mean, I just pulled this off Chabad.org. It's obviously based on the chumash. I'm assuming it's correct. So 10 generations from Noah to Abram. So where does that fit in? That's a really good question. Don't know.
Well, it would appear to be saying that Abraham was the same generation as the Tower of Babel.
Well, it would have to be.
But it can't have been because
no,
surely,
Abram must come and post. They have different nations by the time we get to Abraham.
Yeah.
Right? Good question. I know. We'll try to find out. So look in the chumash, see if that's exactly 10 generations or not. Good question. Don't know, actually. And could go find a chumash now. Believe it or not, it's going to take me time. So let's move on for now. But it's a good question. Please remind me at the end to look that up. Right. How is Noah described in the chumash?
Righteous in his generation.
Right. Yes. Do you know how many other people are described as righteous?
Well, it's not
No.
the same generation.
Well, the answer is none. Nobody else is given the title in the Torah of tzaddik, not Moshe or Avraham. The closest we come, anyone know what the closest we come is? Someone who's described as upright and free of blame. Might surprise you.
No, he said not Moshe.
Not much.
No, it's not one of the main characters.
Oh, it's
So
not.
apparently Noah is the only person in Tanakh, in the whole book of both the Torah and the prophets and all the writings, that's called the tzaddik. The other one we'll see in a moment. Okay, so let's just see how Noah is described in this week's Parsha. Who would like to read number 1?
I'll read it if you like. These are the generations of Noah. Noah was a righteous man.
Go.
What?
Yeah, we
Noah
lost
was a
you.
righteous man. He was perfect in his generation. Noah walked with God.
Have I lost everyone or just Brenda?
think he was that perfect.
I think you just lost Brenda. No, not us. I'm still
Sorry, I
here.
lost it. Oh, I
No.
lost everyone there. Sorry,
Oh.
I think that was me. Sorry, carry on. Go on.
Oh, these are the generations of Noah. Noah was a righteous man. He was perfect in his generation. Noah walked with God.
Okay, right. Righteous, perfect this generation. We'll come back to that in a minute. Okay, here's the other person that's described as righteous. A young man called Eov, Job. Who'd like to read that? Number 2.
I will.
Sorry, not righteous, but close. Go on.
There was a man in the land of Uz named Job. That man was blameless and upright. He feared God and shunned evil.
So not even called the tzaddik, but he's called blameless and upright. So that's the closest we come to giving anyone this moniker, this title. Right. Now, what about Noah at the end of his life? Anyone remember what he was at the end of his life?
He was drunk.
He was drunk,
Yeah,
yeah.
you know when you hear about these Hollywood stars, you say like, I don't know, like what's her name? Oh, can't think of her name. Drew Barrymore, that was in E.T. It was, a massive superstar who's now like just like got a drug problem, and like Macaulay Culkin, all these people that like were really famous and they were really big shots, and now they're like in the gutter or whatever. I don't know. Anyway, so let's see Noah at the end of his life. Who would like to be number 3?
I'll read that. Noah, a man of the soil, proceeded to plant a vineyard. When he drank some of its wine, he became drunk and lay uncovered inside his tent. Ham, the father of Canaan, saw his father naked and told his 2 brothers outside. But Shem and Jephthah took a garment and laid it across their shoulders. Then they walked in backwards and covered their father's naked body. Their faces were turned the other way, so that they would not see their father naked.
Right. And there's different explanations of that. Some say that Ham actually castrated his father or have inappropriate intimacy with his father. There's all kinds of things, but it's not pleasant. It's amazing how some things just go back to the dawn of time. People have been getting drunk on wine since time immemorial, and getting themselves into trouble. But why do people drink? Usually to drown their sorrows, yes? To get away from reality.
Yeah, normally, yeah.
Right. So let's look at what's happening here. You have this man of God who's a tzaddik, who's suddenly become a wreck, basically. Right? He's become a drunkard. He was clothed in virtue. He lies naked now. He saved his family from the flood, and now his sons can't even bring themselves to look at him. It's a terrible decline. What? And then you have, someone like Moshe or Avram, who into old age is a paragon of virtue. So what's happened here? What's gone wrong? So the answer is, it's the classic case of, was Noah righteous? Yes, he was. He was very righteous. He was a righteous man who did what God told him to, who was a pillar of...
He was only perfect in his generations.
Right.
Compared to the other people in his generation.
Right. We'll come back. Yes. And we'll come back to that in a moment. One second. When are we going to come to that? Oh, we're going to come to that soon. But before we even come to that, right, let's look at what's happening here. It's absolute disaster. The world is filled with violence. By the way, you know how they say violence in these parshas, don't you?
Hamas.
Used.
Hamas.
Hamas, correct. I've no idea if there's any link to the etymology there. Anyway, Hamas in the Chumash basically means, wanton destruction, violence, and criminality. Isn't that funny or not funny? Coincidental.
Probably not.
No, not funny. Funny is the wrong word. Funny is in like strange, not funny as in amusing.
Funny peculiar.
Yes, thank you. The world is corrupt. The world's full of violence. God himself, what does God say? He says he regretted making mankind. Yeah? His heart was heavy. Can you think what his heart is like now, if that's how God felt then? Right? His heart was heavy. He regretted making mankind. Who comes along and saves the day? Noah. Noah is so righteous, his faith keeps the world from destruction. That's a pretty big achievement. Think about that for a minute. Right? God makes a covenant with Noah, which is never stated explicitly, we've talked about before. The covenant of Noah, of the rainbow, of the Noahide laws. So as Avram is the first Jew, Noah is the first human being. It's interesting, by the way. Gavi is called Gavriel Noach. He was named after Rabbi Holtzberg. You often forget kids have other names, because you don't use them. I forget that he's called Noach. That you do find, although Noah and Adam are very popular biblical Jewish Hebrew names, you do actually find in the kind of more frum world that they actually don't officially use them. Why? Because basically they predate the first Jew. So people like to name after Jewish heroes, Avram, Yitzhak, Yaakov, Moshe, and David, Shlomo, all these people, and the ladies as well. Whereas Adam is the first man, but he's not seen as the first Jew. I know, it's just interesting. We have a book, by the way. Someone wrote a book. It's a novel. It's very clever, actually, based on Midrash, called Adam Harishon. And so they also wrote one called Noah. It's a whole book if anyone wants to borrow it. You've got 1 week to read it before it's out of date. But the funny thing is, the first time when the kids saw the side of the spine, they thought it said Adam Harrison. So Adam Harishon. So we always joke in our family, what was his surname? So they anglicized it to Harrison. So he wasn't Adam Harishon, he was Adam Harrison. Anyway, so Noah is the father of humanity, right? Avram is the father of Judaism. And yet, what was Noah's influence? We know the answer to this question. Was he influential? Was he what we call an influencer nowadays? Did people follow him?
Because only he and his family got on the ark. Nobody else joined them.
Correct. Right. So let's see what God says. God says, go into the ark. Go on, who'd like to read number 5? Who hasn't read yet? Anyone?
Oh, I'll do it again if you like.
Yeah.
And Shem said to Noah, go into the ark with all your household, for you alone have I found righteous before me in this generation.
Right, you're the only righteous one, right? That's good because it saved the generation. But, your virtue comes from having stayed righteous you stayed sane in a mad world. That's not to be sneezed at. Right? I told you I had a student called Alex Dover in Liverpool. He always used to say, he was in Gush, I think. You say that Rav Lichtenstein, Rosh Shiva used to say, people say, Noah, was he really righteous? Was he only righteous by his generation? When you're the only person in the whole Bible that God calls a tzaddik, you're doing pretty well. Yeah? Right? He must have been a very important person. He's the only person that the Torah calls a tzaddik, a righteous person. But nonetheless, right? The classic one, I think the Midrash says, people would say to him, what are you doing? He'd say, I'm building an ark because God's going to destroy the world. But he didn't go out and put it on Twitter. He didn't put billboards up. He didn't share the good news or the bad news, as it were. That was his that's the criticism. So on the one hand, it's easy to criticize and say, why didn't you preach to the people around you? He'd say, listen, don't criticize me. At least I wasn't influenced by them. It didn't rub off on me. I stayed righteous. Yes, but you didn't influence them either, right? Somebody would go, whatever, to the British Army and come home and say, a Jewish soldier, let's say, the whole time I was there, I kept Shabbat as much as I could, and I only ate kosher rations, and I put on tefillin every day. And were there any other Jewish soldiers? Yes, there are about 100 in my platoon, but I didn't bother them, they didn't bother me. So you say, oh, you missed an opportunity. You could have had Kiddush with them. You could have put on tefillin with them. You could have encouraged them to eat kosher. Listen, at least I still kept up my standards. Don't knock me. I'm still from or whatever. Yes, that's true. That's true. But why didn't you influence those around you?
There's always people willing to criticize you.
Yeah. So yeah, it's easy to be what they call in America a Monday morning quarterback, right?
Yeah. Yes.
The person that says, "Oh, you should have done this, and you should have done that." Yeah. Okay. So, but this is a legitimate question. So there's an old Hasidic saying. It's saying Noach was a tzaddik in pelts. A pelt means a pelt, P-L-T, a fur coat in Yiddish, right? So what's a tzaddik in pelts? So they always give the analogy, right? It's cold. It's getting colder now. So what are you going to do? You're going to put on a fur coat, which protects you, but doesn't help the rest of the people, or you're going to put the heating on, right? I can tell you nowadays, look at my smart meter, I'm going to put on a fur coat. But they always talk, the tzaddik in pelts is the tzaddik who, it's cold, I need to wrap myself up warmly. That's true. That will insulate you. It won't help anyone else, right? So listen, we're not knocking it, it's sensible to keep warm, but wouldn't it be nice to put the heating on so that everyone else is warm as well? So that's a tzaddik in pelts. You're doing the job, but you're only looking out for yourself. So this is the debate. Let's see the debate amongst sages. This is Rashi on that very verse. Who would like to read Rashi? Is Julian there? You haven't read yet.
No, he's not here today.
Oh, he's not there. Oh, of course, you're in Shul. Sorry. Yes, right. Okay. I guess, I don't know. I think we're back to you, Iris, possibly, no?
Okay. In his generations, some of our sages interpreted the word generation favorably. How much more so if he had lived in a generation of righteous people, he would have been even more righteous. Others interpret it derogatorily. In comparison with his generation, he was righteous, but if he had been in Abraham's generation, he would not have been considered of any importance.
By the way, there's a very simple answer to that, isn't there? He wasn't in Abraham's generation, It's like saying to your kids, if you'd been alive 100 years ago, you wouldn't have. Okay, but you weren't. That's the reality. We live now. There's actually a very important lesson we learn from the Akedah. It says of Yishmael that God judged him Bashehu Sham, where he stood at that moment. And there's actually a very important principle there. Don't what if and maybe and what about and if you would have this and if I would have been around. But you're not. We live in the here and now. So you could even say it's irrelevant. It's irrelevant what you don't know what he would have been like in Abraham's generation because he wasn't, right? People saying, if I would have done this, I would have done that, really, yeah. Right? The current topical one is, if there would be another, whatever, God forbid, another Shoah. People say, oh, we would stand up and, I think one of the most repeated things I've seen the last few days is people saying, I never understood how people could stand by. I just never understood it. And now seeing what's going on, I understand how easy it is to be a bystander. Just say nothing. And that's it, and the evil flourishes, unfortunately. So it's easy to say, I would have done this. If I would have been around, I would have that. But you don't know because you weren't there. Okay. But it is a question that's asked. So, interesting question. Was Noah's isolation his actual personality? Was he a loner? Or was it just a tactic? Sometimes you have to, hunker down, I don't know. Unfortunately, I heard about a medical student who's on a placement somewhere where they're very anti-Israel. Jewish medical student, they feel very threatened. They want to transfer. So in the meantime, the best advice probably is to just keep your head down. Now that person might be a very sociable, influential person, but there's time you keep your head down. So was Noah keeping his head down because that was what was needed because he was surrounded by, frightening, murderous gangs of people who wouldn't listen to him? Or was it his innate personality? So if it's just a tactic, what? He might have been even greater in Avram's generation. Noah had the strength to withstand terrible challenges, right? He stayed righteous. So we're saying, that was just because everyone else was wicked. Or maybe that was his inner strength. Maybe in Abram's generation, he would have been even stronger because he would have been influenced by Abram. Or maybe he would have always been this kind of recluse that would have just kept himself to himself and would never have sought to influence others in the way that Avram did. We don't know. It's an interesting question. Yes? What was he actually supposed to do? How are you supposed to be an influence for good in a society of evil? A very topical question, right? What are you supposed to do? Are you really supposed to speak to people who don't listen to you? People who don't even listen to God himself? Right? The first murder in history took place yesterday, last week, Cedra, right? Gracious. What does God say to Cain? Anyone remember? There's this line.
Before he killed his brother,
Before he kills his brother, what does God say to him?
he said, "Well, work on it and work on your."
Yeah, basically. Yeah, let's see. Would you like to read it, Brenda?
And Hashem said to Cain, "Why are you distressed? And why is your face fallen? Surely if you do right, there is uplift. If you do not do the right, but if you do not do right, sin couches at the door, its urge is towards you, yet you can be its master."
Right. So basically, don't do it. God himself says, I know you're tempted. Sin is crouching at the door. You can overcome it. And what does Cain do? He kills his brother anyway. Doesn't listen to God, right? People don't listen to God. So what's Noah supposed to think? Well, I'm going to shout, I'm going to tell everyone. No, but we know from later times that, right? Jeremiah, they said, I think they wanted to kill him. Does that sound right? Because he was the prophet of doom. People didn't listen to him. Yeah. I think Isaiah also at one time. So, it's very easy saying you should speak out, right? Just by the way, in the interest of fairness, there is a huge problem in certain local communities. There are extreme elements who will happily threaten to harm those who are moderate, right? So it's very easy for me to say to local communities, you should all be condemning Hamas. It has happened before that those who stand up and condemn terror have been attacked physically, threatened, in some cases even killed. So it's not a straightforward thing. It's very easy to say we should all stand up and be counted. But there is another side of that. You're dealing with very dangerous people who may well hurt you. So it's very easy to say Noah should have gone and shouted from the rooftops and told everyone to repent, or, God is at, but in the moment, would it have worked, or would they probably possibly just attacked him or killed him? It's not so simple. It sounds easy, right? Cain himself didn't listen to God. Others don't listen to God. So, that's just something to think about. So what are we asking from Noah? The reality is, if we look at the story, that he basically crumbles towards the end of his life. So the suggestion is that he perhaps doesn't have the backbone of other leaders in other generations. So when we say that he was righteous for his generation, let's not take away from that. He had tremendous challenges and he withstood them. He wasn't somebody who thought beyond that. He wasn't somebody with a vision, somebody who looked at the rest of the world and thought, well, it's not going to work for just me and my family to be saved. Let me go and try to convert some people to the cause, and the end result is that by the end of his life, he's just spent. He's got no vision. He's the only one left in the world, whatever. And it's just like, he turns to drink. Maybe that's all indicative that he was basically a recluse that, ended up in the wrong place at the wrong time, or the right place at the right time. And if he'd been another generation, he would have also had that same approach. Listen, if I can save myself, that's already progress, something. What are we expecting? So the Talmud has a similar discussion, actually. In the time leading up to the destruction of the first temple, it was a time of great lawlessness. We have a similar thing in the Talmud. Sorry, it might be slightly small. I hope everyone can read that. Who would like to read?
You want me to?
Go on, Pam.
What's the first bit? Aha.
Aha.
Aha, I think he's saying Acha. Acha, I think it's a misspelling.
Aha ben, is it?
Yes, Reb Hanina.
Hanina said, never did a favourable word go forth from the mouth of the Holy One, blessed be he, of which he retracted for evil, except the following, where it is written, and the Lord said unto him, go through the midst of the city, through the midst of Jerusalem, and set a mark upon the foreheads of the men that sigh and cry for all the abominations that are being done in the midst thereof. From Ezekiel. The Holy One, blessed be he, said to Gabriel, go and set a mark of ink on the foreheads of the righteous, that the destroying angels may have no power over them, and a mark of blood upon the foreheads of the wicked. that the destroying angels may have power over them. Said the attribute of justice before the Holy One, blessed be he. Sovereign of the universe, how are these different from those? Those are completely righteous men, while these are completely wicked, he replied. Sovereign of the universe, said Justice. They had the power to protest, but did not. Said God, had they protested, they would not have heeded them. Sovereign of the universe, said Justice. This was revealed to you, but it was revealed. Sorry, this was revealed to you, but was it revealed to them?
Right. So,
Is that
so
the
God
end?
says, yeah, well, yes, I'll give you the yes, that's the end. Sorry, I'll give you the postscript in a moment. Right. So what's going on here, right? It's a time of great lawlessness and great destruction towards the end of the time of the first temple, basically. And Rav Chanina said that never did Hashem retract anything he said except for this. And we're going to see what retraction is in a minute. The Lord said to Ezekiel,
No, to Gabriel.
Sorry, the angel Gabriel, go through the midst of the city and set a mark upon the foreheads of the men that sigh and cry. All the abominations are being done in the midst thereof. I don't think it means here protest, by the way. It just means all the men, the righteous men that are in pain. Right? And he said to Gabriel, set a mark of ink on the foreheads of the righteous, so that the angels, when they come and destroy the city, they won't be destroyed. So metaphorically speaking, basically they'll be saved. Right? And put a mark of blood upon the foreheads of the wicked, that they should know that they can kill them, basically, destroy them. So along comes the attribute of justice, right? Of mishpat, and says, 1 second. How are the righteous any different from the wicked? God says, what do you mean? They're completely righteous, but they're completely wicked. Says justice, no, they're not righteous, because they could have protested and they didn't. And God says, listen, I'm God, I know, right? That if they protested, no one would have listened to them, right? Says justice, you know that because you're God, but they didn't know that. Why didn't they speak up? Sound very topical, right? Why didn't they speak up? Well, no one would have listened to them. So what? You don't know until you try. And the postscript is that along comes justice and says, you should punish the righteous for not speaking up. And God says, no, we wouldn't have listened. Justice says, no, you know that, but they didn't know that. How can you be sure you'll fail if you don't try? And the Talmud says that in the end, Hashem agreed with the attributes of justice, and that they were, I don't know exactly what happened in terms of practicalities, but they were culpable for their silence. And we have this principle: when something bad is happening, when corruption, violence, injustice are around, you have to protest, even if no one's going to listen. Why? Because you're showing your integrity. Silence is deemed consent or acceptance. Okay, you don't know that no one's listening, by the way, also. Right? You have to think that you might have an impact on somebody. So we can criticize Noah for his silence. Yes, he himself was righteous, like those people in that time. Right? We condemn Hamas atrocities, right? The president of the PLO phoned the ambassador of somewhere and told him he condemns Hamas. Okay, sorry. Why can't he put that in the newspaper? Why can't he say that to Israel? Yeah, right? Jeremy Corbyn will tell you, I privately said that it's not good, whatever. Yeah, you didn't say it very loud. You whispered it under your breath. Not good enough. Not good enough. You have to speak up. It's very topical, as it always is. And it's actually not the first time, by the way, it occurs in the Talmud. Let's just look explicitly. What Yechezkel himself says. Who would like to read number 10? This is from Ezekiel.
I'll read that. Son of man, I am sending you to the Israelites, to a rebellious nation that has rebelled against me. They and their ancestors have been in revolt against me to this very day. The people to whom I am sending you are obstinate and stubborn. Say to them, this is what the sovereign Lord says, and whether they listen or fail to listen, for they are rebellious people, they will know that a prophet has been among them.
Right? Sometimes you just have to speak up, even if it's going to fall upon deaf ears. Because if you don't, people say, nobody told us. Right? Nobody said it was wrong. Nobody challenged it. right? It's interesting, one of the problems with WhatsApp groups nowadays, everyone knows that everyone's seen your message. So there was a certain WhatsApp group someone started that was unfortunately attacking whatever. It was attacking a particular leader that this person basically had a whole situation and they had a grudge against a particular leader in the community and they felt that this person hadn't done enough to save them. And this person started a group where they were basically slagging off this person. And they put lots of people on the group, right? And basically it came up and somebody else said, oh yeah, I'm on that group. I noticed all that criticism stuff. And the target of all of this said, wait a minute, you're on the group. Why didn't you say something? He said, well, I don't want to say anything. I'm just sitting there quietly. But you're not sitting there quietly because everyone sees that Rabbi Wallenberg is on this group. Why didn't he say something? Oh, I'm on a Facebook group. Oh, there's lots of rabbis on there. They never say anything. Must be okay. Yeah. So, sometimes you've got to just speak up. I mean, I don't know, when I'm trying to think about sermons or yes, Facebook rants, I often think to myself, is there any point, is anyone going to listen? I actually, I took myself off a group this morning because somebody on the group had said something that I didn't agree with about Israel. And I thought to myself, you know what, there's no point arguing because they're not going to listen. But I can't stand here silently because my silence is tacit, what do they call it? Approval. So I will just remove myself from this particular discussion. It's toxic anyway. I don't like these rabbis that get up and give sermons every week about things that no one's going to listen to and have no influence over. On the other hand, sometimes you have to call things out, and sometimes you have to protest, and sometimes you have to speak up. And this is what we're saying to the world now about Israel. Sometimes you just have to say it like it is, even if no one's going to listen. One person might listen, even if they don't. It's about doing the right thing. So one way we could read the story of Noah is it's a lack of leadership. He's righteous. You can be a righteous person without being a leader. He's not a visionary. He's not a bad person. He's a good man, but he's not an influencer. He's the guy that comes to shul 3 times a day and keeps kosher and keeps Shabbos and, I don't know, puts on tefillin every day, all those things, but just does it quietly and doesn't bother anyone else. And he's a very nice guy, very righteous, but not an influencer. That, to be fair, there's a pattern, right? What did Adam and Eve say when God said, who told you you're naked, blah, blah, blah. How did you know? Why have you eaten from the tree? What did they do immediately? They blamed the serpent, yes? Right? What was Cain's response when God said, where's your brother?
How should I know?
Right, am I my brother's keeper? They always publish misquotes. I think Sherlock Holmes never actually said elementary, my dear Watson. You know that? He said elementary. But he never said elementary, my dear Watson. And what's his name when he met him in the desert? Didn't actually say Dr. Livingstone, I presume. And all these misquotes. But anyway, you also have partial quotes. So everyone's always very quick to say, you'll say to somebody, oh, have you seen so-and-so? You say, am I my brother's keeper? Well, you haven't read the story because the whole point of the story in the Bible is, yes, you are. Right? And your brother's blood cries out from the earth and you should own up and take responsibility. So unfortunately, that's never quoted. So, right, Cain says, am I my brother's keeper? Yes, you are. And you failed dismally. So Noah, along comes Noah, and God says, I'm going to destroy everybody in the world. And so on. Noah says, oh, that's not good. God says, build an ark to save you and your family and all the animals. He does it, right? He's a job's worth. He does his job in the face of overwhelming odds, but he doesn't influence anyone else. And the problem with that is we have so many principles that we know, right? We have the principle that we're all Kol Yisrael Arevim Zeh B'Zeh, that we're all responsible for one another, right? We have a human notion of, responsibility. Right, we have the concept of looking out for each other, sticking up for each other. I mentioned on Shabbos, for those who weren't there. So it's a beautiful idea the chief rabbi brought from the Belzer Rebbe. So the whole Achenu that everyone's singing, right? Achenu, Kol Beis Yisrael, our brothers and sisters, the whole house of Israel, those in captivity should be redeemed. So if you look in the Siddur, we say it Mondays and Thursdays when there's Tafel, we say it after Leyaning, and it comes after 4 other entreaties to God, where we say Yehi Ratzon Milfanecha, whatever it is. We say, may it be your will, O God, right? We pray to God, we beseech God. And then suddenly, when it comes to those in captivity and those in distress, we say, Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael, all of our brothers and sisters, may they be redeemed. So the classic question is, why do we not say Yehi Ratzon? For all the others, we say Yehi Ratzon, may it be your will, O God. Here we just say, our brothers and sisters in Israel who are in captivity, may they be redeemed. Why don't we say, it's a very strong thing to say, God, we want this to be your will. We want you to desire this. So the Belzer Rebbe said, because when you have achenu means what? Achenu means our brothers, right? Our brethren. It's the brotherhood, the sisterhood. When you have that unity, hinem atov v'manayim, right? How good it is when people sit together, when people are united in brotherhood and shared commonality and compassion, that evokes far more mercy than my just saying to God, I want you to do this for me. Yiratzah, make me your will, O God. Forget that. Look at this, achenu, they're our brothers. These are not some distant people, distant cousins. Our brothers and sisters, please help them. God says, you've got brotherhood, you have unity. Right, now I'm taking notice. So it was a beautiful idea. So all these concepts, no one fails on all of them. This comes back to what they say in Yiddish. He's a tzaddik in belt. He's a righteous man. It's very cold out. Right? It's very dark out. What does he do? He takes care of himself. He doesn't light a fire, influence and warm others, puts a coat on. You're not a bad person if you do that. You're just not an influential person. You're not a leader. You're not someone who seeks to change your surroundings, right? So, coming back to the original question, why did Noah get drunk? Maybe it was just all too much for him. You know, he's come through this flood. He's done exactly what God told him. Suddenly, it dawns on him that, where am I? We've lost the whole world. You know, something's gone wrong here. It's just me and my family left, and I'm just like, I don't know, maybe he felt guilty. Maybe that's why he drank. Who knows? But you know, he's a job's worth. He gets the job done, and no take away from that. But you know, you think nowadays we're so concerned with outreach and Jewish education. The first thing you think to yourself is, why didn't he try to influence more people? Why didn't he try to share, you know, the good news? So, nobody would have listened. But we see from the Gemara and from Yechezkel that God himself was retracted the view initially that you don't speak up if people won't listen, and said, you know, sometimes you have to speak up. Now, by that, you could also turn around and say, didn't we learn elsewhere that when it says you should rebuke people, you should only do it if people listen, if it will be constructive? That's true as well. So anything you say has to be measured, it has to be effective. But sometimes you have to speak even if people won't listen. I'm not talking about telling people off and embarrassing them. We're talking about taking a stand on principle things. So yes, when somebody says, you know, if I condemn Hamas, no one's going to listen to me, but I might get a brick through my window. I'm very sorry to hear that, but maybe you still have to do it, you know, or whatever the contemporary equivalent is. Anyway, let's see what Rabbi Sachs has to say in conclusion. Who would like to read Rabbi Sachs? Any volunteers?
I'll read it again if you like.
Go on, Iris. We started with you, we'll finish with you.
The Torah sets a high standard for the moral life. It's not enough to be righteous if that means turning our back on a society that is guilty of wrongdoing. We must take a stand. We must protest. We must register dissent, even if the probability of changing minds is small. That is because the moral life is a life we share with others. We are, in some sense, responsible for the society of which we are a part. It's not enough to be good. We must encourage others to be good. There are times when each of us must lead.
Right. So it's the same point. Right? It's very easy to criticize people. Look, you know, people who in their own way, in their own small corner of the world, are flying the flag and keeping up their standards. That's not easy in today's world. But we see from Noah, you know, that makes you a tzaddik relatively, makes you a relative tzaddik, which is still a big thing. So you'll say to me, so how come Noah's the only one that gets the title tzaddik in the whole Torah? So maybe the answer is because, you know, he went against the grain, he challenged his generation, and he survived, but he didn't influence others. It's not enough. We see that in the world today. Right? Someone says, I'm with you. Good. Now I want you to write to a newspaper. I want you to write to MP. I want you to say that publicly. I want you to join us. I want you to show solidarity. No, I can't do that. But you should know, you know, privately, you know, or you get something, you know, where someone says something, I suppose the equivalent would be school bullying. Nowadays, it's unfortunately WhatsApp group. Someone told me recently, you know, somebody was on a group with some people and, you know, somebody's a bit aggressive and put somebody down. And, you know, people contact that person privately saying, I'm so sorry you had to go through that. Why can't you say that publicly? It's better than nothing. But why can't you say that publicly? You know, the newspapers, when they print retractions, they're all supposed to do it. You know, if it was a front page story, they're supposed to print the retraction on the front page, right? They often don't, but I think they're supposed to. You know, you have to give it equal prominence. Right? It's another problem we'll see in the next few weeks, I'm sure. Someone will come up with some story about Israel's done this, that, and the other, and that'll turn out to be fake. And the retraction will be printed in, you know, tiny microscopic print on page 55 or whatever, you know. So listen, it's better than nothing, you know. If a kid's being bullied in school and one of the other parents comes to you and says, I'm so sorry to hear this, you know, we all agree that that kid's a terrible bully and, you know, we don't know what we can do about it. Well, for starters, say it publicly. Don't just say it privately. Very important. You know, private's better than nothing. So listen, putting a fur coat on will keep you warm. It just won't help everyone else. So very topical as it happens, I think, is often the case. Anyway, any questions, comments, thoughts, rants?
Just
I'll just
thought
stop.
about Noah. I would have thought
Yeah.
he must have been very lonely. You come out the